The rain hammered against the streets of Chicago like angry fists, each drop a small percussion in the symphony of the city's autumn night. Marcus Reed stood beneath the awning of a closed boutique, watching the water cascade in sheets across the pavement. His dark coat was damp at the shoulders, his hands shoved deep into pockets that held nothing but worn leather and old regrets. He'd been a detective for 17 years, and the rain still made him feel like a failure. The anonymous letter had arrived 3 days ago, cream-colored paper with words typed in a deliberate, old-fashioned font. The Collector's Underground Auction. Saturday night, basement of the Meridian Hotel. Bring your curiosity and your silence. The box awaits. Marcus had nearly thrown it away. Instead, he'd spent the last 72 hours investigating the Meridian, its owner, its reputation for hosting the kind of events that existed in the spaces between law and legend. He pushed off from the awning and moved into the rain. His destination was 3 blocks away. The basement of the Meridian was everything Marcus expected and nothing he could have predicted. The air hung thick with cigarette smoke and something else, something ancient and vaguely unsettling. The space had been transformed into an underground gallery, paintings and sculptures arranged on white pedestals beneath soft amber lighting. 30 people milled about with the careful disinterest of those who trafficked in stolen artifacts and forbidden knowledge. Champagne flutes passed from hand to hand like sacraments. Dmitry Korsakov stood at the center of it all, a man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every soul in the room. He wore an ivory suit despite the basement's dampness somehow remaining immaculate, as if the world's moisture dare not touch him. "Welcome, Detective Reed," Dmitry said smoothly, appearing beside Marcus like smoke coalescing into form. "I wondered if you would accept my invitation." "You know who I am," Marcus said, not as a question. "Of course. The detective who lost everything chasing ghosts. The man who opened one door too many and found only emptiness. How fitting that you should come to see what this door might reveal." Dmitry gestured toward the far end of the basement, where a velvet curtain hung, deep crimson and heavy as a confession. Before Marcus could respond, the auction began. Dmitry moved through the collection with practiced ease, painting by painting, sculpture by sculpture. Prices climbed into territories that made Marcus's monthly salary seem laughable. Then Dmitry paused, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "And finally," Dmitry said, his voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous, "we present something truly extraordinary. A box, nothing more, or everything. The documentation is complicated. Let us simply say it has traveled through 7 centuries, 7 continents, and 7 owners. Each owner experienced what we might call transformation. Whether that transformation was blessing or curse remains subject to interpretation." He pulled back the curtain. The box sat on a pedestal of black marble, catching the light like it was made of shadow itself. It was perhaps 12 inches long, 8 inches wide, crafted from wood that seemed to shift between mahogany and something darker. The surface was covered in intricate carvings, symbols and images that seemed to move when viewed peripherally. Gold filament traced patterns across the wood, forming designs that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than the human eye could comfortably process. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a recognition without memory, a knowing without knowledge. Then she spoke. "Please don't open it." The voice came from behind him, soft but urgent, carrying the weight of desperate certainty. Marcus turned to find a woman he hadn't noticed before, though she now seemed to dominate the space around her. She was perhaps 30, with dark skin and darker eyes, her black hair pulled back severely from a face marked by intelligence and fear. She wore a simple gray dress that contrasted sharply with the ostentatious display around her, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the small notebook she held. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "Elena Vasquez," Dmitry interjected smoothly, "an expert in artifact authentication. The charming one has come to verify our treasure's legitimacy. though it seems Dr. Vasquez has concerns. It's not about legitimacy, Elena said, her accent carrying the warmth of Puerto Rico and the chill of someone who'd seen something terrible. It's about wisdom. Some doors exist for a reason, to remain closed, to remain sealed. This box is not meant to be opened by the curious or the greedy or even the brave. A fascinating perspective, Dmitri mused. And yet here it sits. And surely there are those willing to pay for its secrets. The auction began in earnest. The bidding climbed rapidly, each offer met by another more aggressive than the last. Marcus found himself watching Elena rather than the box, noting how her hands clenched tighter with each bid, how her eyes closed, briefly as if saying goodbye to something precious and terrible. When the gavel came down, a Russian oligarch with cold eyes and a colder smile claimed victory. He paid in cryptocurrency, the transaction completed within minutes. Then he stood, collected his documentation, and reached for the box. "No!" Elena cried out, moving forward. "Please, I'm begging you. You don't understand what you're holding. My grandmother spent her entire life warning people. She spent her final hours making me swear to prevent—" The oligarch smiled and walked toward the exit, the box tucked under his arm. Marcus found himself moving without conscious decision, his body remembering training and instinct long before his mind caught up. He intercepted the Russian at the staircase, placed a hand on the man's arm. Their eyes met for one charged second, and something unspoken passed between them. The Russian nodded slightly, handed the box to Marcus, and departed as if the evening had concluded naturally. Marcus stood holding the box, feeling its weight, which seemed both negligible and infinite. Elena appeared beside him, her hand reaching out, then falling back. "What happens now?" Marcus asked softly. "Now you have to choose," she whispered. "You can leave it sealed. You can give it to me. Or—" She paused, and her eyes filled with something like resignation and inevitability. "You can open it, and everything changes. Your life, your understanding of reality, every choice you've made, all of it becomes recontextualized into something larger and stranger, and ultimately transformative." Marcus looked at the box in his hands. He thought about the anonymous letter. He thought about the rain outside. He thought about 17 years of chasing meaning in a world that seemed fundamentally empty of it. His fingers found the tiny clasp on the box's side, ancient brass worn smooth by centuries of touch. Elena's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Marcus, please!" He opened the box. The light that emerged wasn't quite light, and the sound that accompanied it wasn't quite sound. Time seemed to fracture into crystalline moments that all occurred simultaneously. Marcus saw cities that had never existed, and people who had never lived felt emotions that belonged to no human heart, understood truths that made sanity seem like a quaint mythology. Elena screamed, but also didn't, and the basement of the Meridian Hotel became something else entirely. A threshold, a crossroads, a moment of rupture where the world's careful fictions fell away. And in that rupture, everything changed forever. Marcus Reed woke to his own heartbeat, which seemed far too loud and far too irregular. The ceiling above him was white, medical-grade sterile, and the room smelled of antiseptic and possibility. He was in a hospital bed. The date on the wall calendar read November 15th. He'd lost 2 weeks. The memories returned in waves, each one more disorienting than the last. Not his memories. Memories that belonged to someone else, several someones, stretching back through time like roots burrowing into earth. He remembered being a merchant in ancient Persia, remembered the weight of that cursed box in his hands. He remembered being a monk in medieval France, remembered the year he'd hidden it in a sealed chamber. He remembered at least a dozen lives that weren't his, lived in centuries that had already turned to dust, embodied by people he'd never been and yet absolutely was. "You're awake," Elena said from the doorway. She looked worse than he felt, which seemed impossible. Her eyes were hollow with exhaustion, her hands wrapped in bandages, her left arm in a sling. But there was something else about her, too. Something that aligned with his fragmented new knowledge. She wasn't just Elena Vasquez, artifact expert. She was Isabella Torres, who'd lived in Seville in 1487. She was Kira Mikhailov, who'd guarded the box in Russia in 1823. She was the keeper, the sentinel, the one who understood what the box actually was. "How long?" Marcus asked, his voice rough from disuse. 14 days, she said, sitting carefully in the chair beside his bed. "You were in some kind of catatonic state. The doctors wanted to do more tests, but I convinced them you just needed rest. I needed to be here when you woke up, needed to make sure you didn't disappear into whatever that box showed you." "What did it show you?" Marcus asked. "The same thing it shows everyone," Elena said quietly. "It showed me myself. All the versions of myself spread across history. It showed me why my family has been bound to protect it for generations. My grandmother, Isabella, my current life grandmother, she was only named Isabella as homage to her past self, the one who first encountered the box. She spent her entire life trying to keep it hidden, trying to prevent anyone from experiencing what we just experienced." "Why?" Marcus demanded, trying to sit up and failing, his body refusing to obey his intentions. "If the box shows us who we are, if it connects us to our past lives, why should that be prevented? Why should that be feared? Because knowing is different from understanding," Elena said, and her eyes held centuries of grief. "The box doesn't just show you your past lives, Marcus. It connects you to them. It makes them active, present, awake in your consciousness. Imagine feeling 700 years of accumulated trauma, 700 years of love and loss and terror all at once. Imagine trying to be yourself when you remember being 7 different people. Some people's minds break. Some people, like my grandmother, spend their lives trying to heal from that fracturing." "Then why did you let me open it?" Marcus demanded. "If you knew, if you understood what it would do, why did you let me do it?" Elena's laugh was bitter and beautiful. "I didn't let you. You were always going to. That was written in the moment I first saw you in the Meridian's basement. I recognized you, Marcus. I've recognized you in 17 different lives. You're the one who's meant to open the box. You're the one who's meant to receive the knowledge." Marcus stared at her, feeling the truth of her words resonate through the layers of consciousness that now occupied his mind. "Why? What's the purpose? Why would the universe, fate, or whatever force governs these things want me to remember?" "Because something's changing," Elena said, and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The world is shifting toward something new. The box exists as a record, a memory keeper for souls who are meant to bridge worlds. My grandmother told me before she died that eventually someone would open the box and not break. Someone who could integrate the knowledge instead of being shattered by it. I think that someone might be you." "Or you could be completely wrong," Marcus said. But even as he spoke, he felt the truth resonating through him. The box had shown him something else, something that Elena didn't know yet. It had shown him a future, glimpses of a world where humanity itself was transforming, where consciousness was expanding beyond the narrow parameters it had always inhabited. "Tell me what you saw," Elena said, reading the shift in his expression. Marcus closed his eyes and let the visions flow. He described cities of light that existed in dimensions sideways to normal space. He described humans who'd evolved to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously. He described a world where the separation between past and present was merely conventional, where accessing one's previous incarnations was as natural as remembering breakfast. He described, in short, the future that the box had revealed to him in those fractured moments of opening. "That's why the box exists," Elena breathed, understanding blooming in her eyes. "Not as a prison, not as a punishment, but as a preparation. Humanity is meant to evolve beyond its current limitations. The box is a gateway to that evolution." "And we're the first?" Marcus asked. "No," Elena said. "We're the first to survive it together. Past keepers opened the box alone, or opened it with people who couldn't handle the transformation. But you and I, we have each other. We understand what we experienced. Maybe that's what changes everything." They sat in silence for long moments, 2 people who'd been fractured across centuries and somehow remained whole. "What happens now?" Marcus finally asked. Now? Elena stood and moved to the window, looking out at Chicago's November landscape. Now we figure out if we keep the box hidden, as my family has done, or if we help humanity prepare for the transformation it's coming into. Now we decide if we're keepers or catalysts. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, something that belonged to Marcus Reed but also to every version of himself that had ever lived. It was a feeling of purpose, of connection, of being part of something vast and terrible and beautiful. I vote catalyst, he said quietly. Elena turned back to him, and her smile was sad and ancient and full of hope. Then we have work to do. The box had been hidden again, locked away in a new location that only Elena knew. But its work had just begun. Marcus and Elena left the hospital 3 days later, two people carrying the weight of multiple lifetimes, ready to reshape the world's understanding of consciousness itself. The transformation had begun, not just in them, but rippling outward in ways they couldn't yet perceive. The world would never be the same, because two people had been brave enough to open a door that most would have kept sealed forever. And in opening it, they'd discovered something far more valuable than secrets. They'd discovered themselves.